You've probably heard the term Rust Belt. Well, from the days gone by, but it might also have meaning today as well. Here to explain how is our good friend Charles McElwee. He brings us a history segment every week here at SSPTV. He's the Vice President of the Board of Directors for the Greater Hazleton Historical Society and Museum. So, we're bringing back the term Rust Belt. How come?
Rust Belt has been a term we've heard a lot in recent years, especially with the 2016 presidential election. It seems like most articles that try to digest the presidential election results from just 2 years ago somehow insert the Rust Belt term. And that generally applies geographically to an area that ranges, and it's always up for debate, but generally ranges from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, really for the upper Midwest, all the way to Wisconsin. So we're including even Minnesota, Ohio, Indiana, really Pennsylvania, and the Midwest. And it could also be a linguistic term, but it really goes back to 1984. Walter Mondale, who was the presidential candidate that year running against Ronald Reagan, he was vice president under Carter and was a U.S. senator from Minnesota before that. But it was that year when he was on a campaign stop that he was referring to this term at a stop in Cleveland. So he was making a speech to steel workers. He said in his speech, Reagan's policies are turning our industrial Midwest into a rust bowl. And that kind of transition into this term known as Rust Belt, and it has been the go-to term for journalists to describe areas like Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or even Hazleton in what are often these anthropological pieces about these areas. But there is a new book out, and it's called Voices from the Rust Belt, and it's edited by Anne Trubeck. She's the editor of Belt magazine. And the book itself, as well as her journalistic endeavor, is interesting because we've certainly seen in recent years with the profiles of cities like Hazleton, they're often inaccurate, distorted presentations. And the goal of this book is to provide an accurate portrayal of cities like Hazleton to remind us that they're far more culturally complex and socioeconomically complicated than people who may cover the area from outside the area may presume.
In part 2 of this interview next week, Charles will look at how the Rust Belt applies to Hazleton.